Today we're going to talk with two high-level leaders about handling pressure, handling criticism, public school system, barriers impacting today's youth, equipping parents and improving the JCPS transportation system. I'm excited for this conversation. At St. Vincent de Paul, we have a Family Success Center, and we're going to be celebrating 10 years here coming up this fall. And we would not be able to do that without our partnerships with JCPS and with Evolve502. Since September of 2014, the Family Success Center has provided year-round educational and social development opportunities to the next generation of our youth. This includes after-school school programming, summer programming, mainly to elementary and middle school students. And our mission closely aligns with JCPS. And we have a learning hub with Evolve502 there that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so hence the guests that we have on today's episode. So today's guests are Dr. Marty Pollio and Marland Cole. Marty was appointed superintendent of the Jefferson County Public School District in April of 2018. He also served as acting superintendent for about a year prior to that. Marty has over 26 years serving JCPS students as an administrator and educator, and I think coach too.
Correct.
Coach basketball, did
Correct.
If I remember right, it was basketball. His primary goal is improving the school culture and increasing student and teacher achievement and engagement. Marland Cole, who's with us, has been the CEO of Evolve502 since October of 2018. Evolve502 is a nonprofit organization focused on creating a path to education for Louisville's youth. They often say at Evolve502 that they were cradle to career connectors, ensuring children are prepared for productive lives. Marland has more than 20 years of experience in the areas of governance, fund development, community relations, and communications. She has spent a lot of her professional career in healthcare, also serving in leadership roles at large hospitals in the Louisville area, and I think that's where we first met.
We did.
Was when you were in the healthcare business. Thanks, you all. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Marty, I want to start with you. When we first got together here, we were talking about the connections that I've had to public school. I'm a public school product from up in New York, and then at the University of Kentucky in college. My dad, just kidding. Yeah, I know. I get that a lot, but they educated me well.
That's right.
They educated
me well.
Great. My dad was superintendent of schools. We'll talk a little bit and make some of that connection. My daughter now is at JCPS at Churchill Park, and my other daughter was a school teacher up in Brooklyn, where she started her career, and then in Henry County at Eminence School District.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get it, and I really do support what you do. And what I'd like to do though is start with kind of your why getting into education. As I mentioned, the decades of being an educator on the ground, a coach, and now in administration and a superintendent of an amazing school district.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here. And so, and I don't know who would have thought at a young age that my goal is to be superintendent. There's not many out there that I think that, but we all do that. We're not sure where we're headed as you grow up. But when in my first life, I wanted to be a college basketball coach. That's what I wanted to do. My dad was a college basketball coach. So I wasn't good enough to play in college, but I decided to go be a manager at Indiana University for Coach Knight and spent 4 years with Coach Knight. And
we could have a podcast.
Oh, we could. There is no question about that. But they don't have a major for coaching basketball. Right. So my dad said, you major in education, because if he was a high school coach and teacher before college, and my mom was a high school teacher as well. So got into education just in case I was going to coach a high school team. Just so happens after 4 years of coaching college, the head coach that I worked for was terminated. And as it works in college, when the head coach is terminated, so are the assistant coaches. Yes. And so I was looking for the next job. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to recruit. I just wanted to coach my own kids. And my parents had relocated to Louisville at the time. And so I decided I would come teach in Louisville. There was one coaching job open in June of '97. That was the academy at Shawnee High School at that time. We had 9 players on the team. But what I got there, I got there and just fell in love with the coaching and teaching part of it. Found kids who just, they cared as much as players for UK or U of L, and they just wanted to be coached. And so I just jumped in, fell in love with that work, and within 2 or 3 years quickly realized that I had a greater calling than just coaching. And so coaching is a great calling, but I had one of my mentors tap me on the shoulder and said, I know you're looking for your next step. You need to be a high school principal. So I went back to school to be a high school principal. I got certified to do that, got to be assistant principal at Wagner, principal at J-Town High School, principal at Doss High School. Never expected to get into this position, but really just, fell in love with building a school culture, teaching teachers how to better relate to kids, how to better teach their content, those type of things. Had a wonderful 10 years as principal and kind of backed into this job. But the reason I'm so passionate about it is because of the 28 years now. I'm in my 28th in JCPS, and my 28 years of being with students, faculty, teachers, educators, all. And I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by where I don't walk around somewhere out in public and run into a former student or a former teacher that I worked with. Can't imagine doing this job without having those kind of roots or connection, because it's a tough job, but just, fell in love with JCPS and what we're doing for kids in need.
That's got to be just an amazing experience to see kids that you had 20 years.
Oh, they're kids that graduated now.
Yeah, right.
So the kid actually I coached on my first team at Shawnee, his daughter is now in the WNBA. Right. So that's how old I feel.
Right.
But that's when you realize education is generational. When you impact one child, you're impacting their children and even their children's children, and that's why education is so important.
Well, let's talk about that, because when you think about, and I'm going to spout out some numbers here, but don't audit me in terms of exactly if I'm right on. These are approximates. 168 schools.
Correct.
Over 7,000 certified teachers. 100,000-ish. I mean, just massive school district, largest certainly in the Commonwealth. And in the top 30, probably in the United States. It's just a daunting responsibility that you have, and people have choices. And I myself here in the community have helped other organizations like the Catholic Education Foundation and what they're doing there in the Catholic school system, and there's other alternative school options that people have. But talk about JCPS, and again, I like I said in the intro, I went through public education for my whole life, got a great education, and really look back fondly on that. But I want, if you could talk through the why JCPS, and I also want you to hit on the types of school. There's schools and education opportunities that you have that just would not be provided if it were not for what you all do. Case in point would be where my daughter Maddie is at Churchill Park.
Yeah, and let me start there at Churchill Park, which is just an amazing school. It is a school for special ed students with significant needs, one adult to every child in the building, and it's required by law because they do have such high needs. We spend a little over $100,000 on every student per year, rightfully so. It is just an amazing place that not many, I would say no other district, at least in the Commonwealth, has this opportunity for kids with such significant need to truly focus on their needs. And we have so many opportunities in this district, whether it's a child with intense special needs or a child who just wants to be in a STEM magnet or program, or like my daughter who was passionate about musical theater. Yep. And there was a spot for her to do that. And there's just not that many districts who meet all the needs of their kids. I'll say this, and I think it's important to note, I'm a public school guy. I'm an advocate for public schools. I went to public schools like you did. My dad was a public school basketball coach and teacher at DuPont Manual High School from 68 to 71. My mom was a teacher at Ballard High School for many years. My daughter went through K-12 through JCPS, and I've been in JCPS for 28 years of it. So I'm a strong advocate for public schools. However, I believe there are great options out there in many other places. So private schools can have great options. I believe in many states, depending upon the charters and how they're built, I believe charter schools can be effective. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I do believe this: the future of our community, this city, this state, and this nation will be based upon the effectiveness of our public school system. And so, I can spout off a whole lot of stats, but I could tell you that we're at about 70% free and reduced lunch right now in JCPS, which is the benchmark for poverty in this community, well, nationally. And I mean, these are the kids who are going to need a great public education system. We now have 20,000 what we call multilingual learners or immigrant students who have come in. We have 13,000 special ed students, 70,000 nearly free and reduced lunch students, and such a wide range of students. But if we're going to be successful as a community, a city and a state and a nation, we are going to have to be successful at educating our kids of highest need. Now, I believe there is a spot for every single student in JCPS, from our highest achieving students. We have students who achieve National Merit Semifinalist every year, which is one of the top honors in the nation. Once again, I'm very proud of she was not one of those, my daughter, but I'm very proud of what she did. She's now at Western Kentucky University. To our neediest students. And that is the beauty for me of public school. It is a home for every child, no matter their background, no matter their history as a student. Public education is where kids come to be educated, and we must educate all. And I believe that's the backbone of this nation.
And it's important for parents to hear that, especially coming out of COVID and all how hard that must have been. It was hard in our business, right? Hard in your business with Evolve502.
Correct.
You had to make shifts and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to have those messages to be continually put out there. And as you move forward, wherever your career takes you, having you as a strong advocate to do what you're saying, to ensure that that the public school systems are effective. Because I agree with you, it's extremely it's extremely important. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in your tenure where we really got off the ground the academies.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Because that's a great opportunity for kids, too, to focus from a career perspective.
Yep. So Academies of Louisville is and I have a passion for high school. I was a high school principal and spent my whole career in high school. And I have a real passion about getting kids engaged in school. So research shows that kids' engagement in school peaks at the third grade. This is across all schools, and it peaks at the third grade and goes downhill through 12th grade from there. And so there's a lot of reasons for that. We know that maturity of kids as they grow older, not interested in other things, cell phone, social media. We could talk all of those things. But in the end, our education system in this country has not successfully engaged and inspired kids to learn. And so what I know research tells us is kids want to learn things that are relevant to them, that they see as a future path for them. And so the Academies of Louisville is a high school program. We've gotten 15 of our reside schools, which means, it's not a magnet school. It's just a kid. If I live in that area, I can go to that high school where they go to the school. We have pathways that are aligned to Kentuckiana Works and what we need in our industries in this city. So it could be healthcare, it could be manufacturing, it could be IT, all of these things. And the kids love this. We get them in a pathway. We have multimedia is another example of that. So kids can sit here and do podcasts while they're at school. They love to do these things. And then we make math, English, science, and social studies more about those, and we get them into the community with business partners doing what they love to do, make it relevant for them. And so we have seen record highs in graduation rate, in post-secondary readiness, in college credit hours, and certifications with our high school graduating seniors because of the work of the Academies of Louisville.
That experiential learning is really important. And I know, Marla, we're going to be talking about Evolve502 and the scholarships, and I can imagine that having the academies in the schools really helps the kids get a sense of kind of what they may be doing. And
Exactly.
I believe in paths, really important. But I do want to, 100,000 kids, 60,000 plus you have to transport as well. I mean, that's a whole business in and of itself. And look, we all read the paper and read stuff. It's been a challenge over the last couple of years. We're into the school year. How's it going? I mean, I know you guys made a lot of improvements and worked real hard on that, but
so very well. It's going very well so far this year. We've been very pleased, and we've had to go through tough times to get there. I don't know if we would have made some decisions we needed to make if it hadn't been for that, and some real learning experiences along the way. But what we essentially had and what we have to face was the fact that we transport more students than almost any other public school district in America. So, and a comparable would be Los Angeles Unified School District, which has 500,000 students. They transport about 25,000 every day. As of last year, it was 60,000. We have half of the bus drivers we had 10 years ago. So in any industry, if you cut your workforce in half and are providing still the same services, you're going to have problems with that. And it started before COVID. It was exacerbated by COVID. We have half the bus drivers we used to have. So we had to make some tough decisions because for me, my focus was we've got to get kids to school on time. We cannot be successful with student achievement if we have hundreds of buses who are showing up late every single day to school, which is what it's been because we had so few bus drivers. So we made some tough decisions. And right now what we're doing is we're getting kids to school on time and we're getting them home efficiently. Yeah. And so I'm happy to say that we made it through some tough times and learned a lot out of the process. I learned a lot about leadership through that, but it is definitely a vast improvement.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Los Angeles, Houston, Chicago.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just that it's not a challenge just here, but I didn't realize that as a percentage, we're the highest of, when you look at that. And because, there's not the mandate that the district has to provide the transportation.
Correct.
But we do.
That's correct.
And as long as we do.
Yep. And it's just not cities, it's rural counties too.
Yeah.
I was just reading today that Bourbon County here in Kentucky was having students late up to an hour a day because of shortage of bus drivers. So this is a national issue across all specters of education. We're really going to have to address as a nation if moving forward if we expect those big yellow buses to keep taking kids to school.
Marland, let's turn to you and talk about Evolve502. And for listeners, I have a passion for not only what Marty does in the public school system, but Evolve502. I've served on the board for a number of years and was there in the beginning. Our Family Success Center at St. Vincent de Paul partners with Evolve502. We have trauma-informed tutors that come to our after-school programming during the after-school and in summer programming as well. For our listeners, do go out to Evolve502's website, take a look at what they do. They're providing supports to families like those that we serve on our campus for elementaries. We've got elementary and middle schoolers. And for us, what we're really focused on there is literacy. Mm-hmm. It's one of the biggest things that our kids are challenged with. But Evolve502 is much, much more than that. And I'd like for you to chat on that, Marland, a bit and then let folks know because you've got, I guess what I'll call a Promise Scholarship. Mm-hmm. I can call it that, right? It's Promise Scholarship.
Exactly right.
For all JCPS graduates. Mm-hmm. Anyone that goes to JCPS can qualify for one of these scholarships to go to our technical college system or to Simmons College here in Kentucky. And you also provide support around that because, in some cases there's barriers for folks to, transportation or daycare or whatever it may be. And you provide some supports around there. Tell us about what you guys are doing. And I also want you to chat a bit for our listeners on what you think the main barriers to success that you see in the youth that you all serve.
Sure. Thank you. In a nutshell, Evolve502's goal is to really help grow the educational attainment of our community. We had a lot of lessons learned from previous work. As you all know, in this city, we have been looking at educational attainment and comparing ourselves to our peer cities on that. The importance of that, obviously, is having a educated workforce to recruit and retain business, but really to also lift up everyone in our community so that all can contribute to and participate in its success. And so a lot of work that had been done prior to around the several mayors looking at education, starting with, I think, Jerry Abramson, Mayor Fisher and his cradle to career look and having different organizations sort of focused on all of the components across the cradle. And then 55,000 degrees, which was really the impetus to get community to come together and collaborate, and also push the needle on having more folks educated in our community. And so lessons learned from all of that work really lifted up, one, from for post-secondary achievement. Young people were not pursuing post-secondary education because of cost or perception of cost, and lack of support really navigating the system. So we knew if we were going to move the needle further, we have to do something about that piece. And then the other, knowing that, I think all children have the ability to learn, but because of family circumstances and lack of resources, which we'll talk more about, they struggle. And those are community issues that JCPS and any district cannot solve for themselves. And so until we kind of galvanized community around some of those efforts, we weren't going to move the needle either. So Evolve502 was really born to sort of lift up these learnings and move that work forward. And so as you mentioned, our sort of signature program, if you will, is the Promise Scholarship, which is available to all eligible JCPS students. They have to graduate from JCPS. They have to apply to and be enrolled in any of the community and technical colleges throughout our state. The majority are going to Jefferson, obviously because of the proximity, and also Simmons College of Kentucky. And they have to at least stay enrolled in 9 credit hours. But if they do all of those things, they have to fill out the FAFSA, which is a piece. Because we are last dollar, we come in after any federal, state aid, other things like that.
So like Pell,
Pell, all of that.
Stuff, yeah.
So we come in after that to fill in the gap, and keys, all of that. And so I like to say, kind of on the spectrum, if you are fully Pell eligible and have most of your tuition covered, what we also provide is what we call an opportunity grant for those students, because we know there's more than tuition to afford to go to college. There's books, there's transportation, there's housing, all of those things. So our lowest income kids get an opportunity grant to help with those expenses. But if you're not, you might be just on the bubble and not Pell eligible, then we're paying the full ride for you to go. So we're filling whatever that gap is.
So it takes that barrier off the table.
It takes that off the table, very much so. And so we're very excited. We've had 3 classes so far. Our 4th class just started this past week. Definitely during COVID, our numbers weren't what we thought they would be, and we're hoping as far as students taking advantage of the opportunity. But you've got to think that first year, that class of 2021, I believe they were in school for 2 weeks in person. So we had to get very creative in reaching out to our families and getting the word out. But I think now we're seeing that shift. We're very hopeful that we'll have pretty good numbers of the class
the
coming in
applications.
now.
I mean, I'm kind of hearing that.
Yeah,
seeing
they
an
were
increase.
definitely increasing. And I think overall college is increasing. I
Right.
think we're seeing that in community colleges as well as some of our 4-years. So that's exciting because we truly believe that, I also come from a family of educators, and it was always taught, that's one thing that can't be taken away from you. That's the one thing that can lift you up. If you can learn and be educated and have that degree, you have many more options and opportunities available to you. So that's really what we're, trying to lift up the message. And also, I think we always think about, when we say college, we think 4-year institutions. We're talking about some level of education past high school. If it's that workforce credential, if you want to go into a trade, and folks, we know we have such a need in this community for the trades, and folks make very good money in those fields, are getting us an associate degree. Some level of education is necessary for you to really reach your full potential and to be able to provide for your families as you move forward.
Marty, I'm just thinking here, what does this mean? I know you've been obviously very much involved in the creation of Evolve502 and serve on the board. And what does this mean to your counselors and the high schools and to the principals to be able to see and encourage the youth to, this is possible.
Yeah,
Think about.
It's an absolute game changer for us and our kids. I say us, but and especially the fact that we've raised money to say we can go all the way back to the, I don't know what it is now, class of 28, 29, whatever we are through. So you're talking kids in 8th and 9th grade. You can say your college is paid for and covered, and so we have so many kids who go off to college and maybe have a semester paid for or 2 semesters paid for, but then they have no idea how they're going to pick it up from there. And the tragedy that we are seeing in this nation, And I have seen it firsthand. Our kids, it's not kids leaving college with debt and a diploma or a degree. It is kids who are leaving college after 1 or 2 years, have no degree, and also still have that debt. So the fact that we can go to our kids and say, this is an opportunity for you to have your college paid for, and yes, you can take other opportunities, but that is absolutely secured by Evolve502 is a game changer. And I will say this, that first year, kids, when you know something's catching on, when I talk to kids, I go into high school, what year are you a senior? I say, what are you going to do next year? Oh, I'm taking advantage of Evolve. Like that has become the narrative.
Yeah.
So kids are saying that now, and that's something that's special.
Yeah, and Marland, are the 4-year schools going to help with that? Because I think about the Pell eligible, and when I worked for a year at U of L. They allowed me to, even though I was a UK grad, they let me.
That's good.
And one of the things that I learned there is just the number of kids that are Pell eligible at U of L. The percentage is really, really high, which is great because they're serving folks that need that kind of support.
Right.
But it sounds like you're also dealing with a lot of kids that are coming out that are going to be Pell eligible. Is there a pathway into a 4-year
There is.
kind of gig?
Thank you for that. Yes, definitely. With the University of Louisville, we're very proud of that. For our, again, we call them our opportunity grant students. They are going to get an opportunity if they receive their associate degree through any of the institutions that they go to with our scholarship and remain Pell eligible. There's also a little bit of a merit piece there as well. But if they do all of those things, U of L is picking them up for 2 more years.
Wow.
So that is a true affordable pathway for our lowest income young people to be able to take advantage. And U of L is doing, and many of our other universities are doing similar things, but that we have that partnership.
So
right
what do
now
you
with
see
U of L.
as some of the barriers? I mean, because to me that sounds like, wow, no brainer, right? But I also know in the business that we're in, in serving folks that are unhoused, and by the way, there's probably, the last number I heard of the number of students that are technically homeless in JCPS that you're assisting is in the 10, some number that I heard
It's
before.
right now around 6,000.
It's a big number that you know of.
So you're So you're talking at 6-7% of the student population.
Yeah.
Right.
And so a lot of these kids are going to come out, maybe get an Evolve scholarship, but they're coming with, experiences that I certainly never experienced.
Exactly.
So I could sit there and say, hey, it's a no-brainer. You get the 2 years, you go off, get another 2 years. But what are some of the things that you're seeing in the students that this opportunity grant is assisting? What are some of those barriers? Because some are just basic living.
They are. It is. And, even with our youngest kids, when you think about all of the things Dr. Pollio has shared, that we truly have families that are living in poverty in our community. They are food insecure, they are home insecure, they are living in trauma, and others are just a paycheck away from being in those circumstances. And so they are not able to provide the necessary resources and support in many cases that help their young people move along. When you think about even our highest performing kids, well-resourced kids, they go to tutors. They have coaches for different things. They have any intervention that you can think of to help them, do better with their test scores and to really achieve. And so our families who struggle and are less resourced do not have those opportunities always. So I think that is a big piece that I think I see with our younger kids and older kids. They may not have the guidance. Maybe their parents didn't go to college themselves. They don't have to navigate the system, and the system is difficult to navigate. Just going through it with my daughter too went to WKU, just going through that process with her and the social capital that I had and the resources that I had available to me to help me, it was still a struggle.
Yeah.
And so when you think about families that do not have that, maybe had bad experiences with school,
Right.
either college or in, high or other grades, it's a challenge. And so we are there on both ends to kind of help support those
So how do we
pieces.
do it? So the students, do they have support going through the 2 years? Is it coming from the technical colleges, or is Evolve?
Well, glad you asked that. Now that we've had 3 classes, we've really been leaning in and learning what is impacting our young people. About 80%, and this may be an old number too, but I remember at one time at Jefferson, about 80% of kids have to work and go to school.
Got it.
So that's a time management issue for a lot of young people. And it's not just because they need extra money. Many times they are supporting their parents. And so there is always that piece of helping young people learn how to navigate that. That's why we allow kids to go part-time with our scholarship, because we knew that was going to be an issue kind of coming in. But we continue to learn that, kids still struggle with that, how to manage their time. We have young people that are dealing with mental support issues. Yeah. So that's a big piece of it, and trying to help them navigate. So it's a lot of times more than the academic issues that impact their ability. They may, their car breaks down, and so they lose their transportation.
Right.
They are homeless.
Yeah.
We had one student, it's one story that I always tell, that had reached out. She graduated from JCPS and went to Jefferson, bright student, reached out to one of our student success coordinators, and those are the folks that actually go into the high schools and build the relationships with our young people. And she said, "Hey, my computer's not working. I need a computer or some help with that." In her conversation with her, she learned she was homeless. Didn't lead with that. And you would think that would have been the thing that she would have mentioned, but either out of pride or just not wanting to, share that level of detail.
Which is not unusual.
Right, and you all see that, I'm sure, every day. And so we were able to get resources for her to be able to help her with that. So those are the kinds of things that our young people are dealing with, that we have to kind of wrap our arms around and help them succeed.
Yeah, that's important. And I know the partnership that you all have together, and Marty, the JCPS has provided funding to help with the supports systems, around what Evolve502 is doing, and you all are commended on that, because families need the help, right? It's not just the student, it's the family unit and the parents as well.
Right, exactly.
Right,
exactly.
What you talk about success stories and those things, and so now we're 3 years in. I mean, we can always talk about, well, this generation just doesn't. They just don't get it. It's not like we walked up in Buffalo. I walked through 30 foot of snow, which I actually did.
Probably. You might have.
To get to the bus.
Yeah.
But what excites you about what you're seeing here with these kids?
Oh, yeah, they are. That's what keeps me in this work every day. Our young people are so resilient, and they really want to achieve and be successful. And when you think about what they've been through, a pandemic, racial unrest, a pretty volatile political climate right now, and they keep coming back, they keep trying, and it's just sometimes they need just little extra support to kind of move forward. But they're bright. It's just seeing, we have the benefit of seeing, young people, say an elementary school kid that can now read her favorite book in front of the class, to seeing a young person saying, "I never thought college would be for me, and because I couldn't afford it, and now here I am and I have this pathway." And to hear what they're trying to do and how they lift back to others to say, we've got a lot of students who are like, "I'm telling all my friends about this scholarship opportunity." Awesome. So it's very heartwarming to see. And I think, young people today too, because of all that they've been through, they have a better sense of self-awareness sometimes than I think I definitely did in school growing up. So they're opinionated. They know, they may not know exactly what they're going to do, but they know that they matter and they want to be successful. And so that's why it's so critically important for us to lift them up, because again, there's just, I think the investment we make in our young people, it just pays forward many, many more times. And when you think about lifting up your community, giving young people opportunity, they're the leaders of tomorrow. They're those that we're going to depend on taking care of us in our health care. They're going to be leading our country moving forward. And so it's important that we invest the time, energy, and really I think more than anything, young people want someone to believe in them and have expectations for them. We all did with our parents. And so that's critically important for us to say, we believe in you, we know you can do this, and we're here to help you navigate.
I admire you so much. You were there at the beginning of this, and I know it's not been easy because I've been there. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of support, from
Yes.
Dr. Pollio and JCPS and the city, as well as funders and people that
It's
care.
been wonderful. Yeah.
But you're the leader. You're in charge. You're making the decisions. You got to do that, right?
Right.
And it's not easy.
Right.
And I think, Marty, and I want to get back to this and talk about this, but I think about your position, and I know what it is to be a superintendent. From watching my father and growing up, and him getting up at 4 a.m. and listening to the weather forecast, and all the things that you do that nobody sees, and you got a board that you have to I'm sure they're not easy to. You don't manage the board.
Work with.
You work with the
Yeah.
board, right? You've got a public, you've got a city, you've got a government, you've got, the largest school district in the Commonwealth and one of the largest in the nation. I admire you, and I can imagine the level of stress. And I was mentioning earlier that my father, with two of his colleagues, wrote a book called "The Living on the Horns of Dilemmas: Superintendents, Politics, and Decision Making." And I'll make sure that I'll get you a copy of
Love
it
one.
from Dr. Kelsey. Is that and. But the challenges, and I know the things that he had to deal with, and I can only imagine that you've seen a lot, and sometimes it's public, sometimes it's not, kind of thing. What advice would you give folks coming up through the ranks, the administration ranks? You've learned some things. What would you have liked to have known that maybe you didn't know when you got into
I
it?
think that's a wonderful question, and this job has always been hard, but exponentially harder now. Any leadership position in 2024, I believe, than it's ever been. And so we are facing a time with technology, good or bad. We could do a whole nother podcast on this, but people have access to comment on leadership decisions more than they ever have before, where everyone can see it. So we know social media has had a major impact on leadership and what people are saying about a leader. And so first and foremost, and it took me some years to understand this. If you're going to be an effective leader, you cannot be on social media. I believe that. If you are looking for compliments on social media about the work that you're doing, you're going to see 5 times as many criticisms of so I will give a small example of what you said. When we talk in the wintertime, just a simple weather decision, are we going to school or not? And I say that's simple. When you have children's lives in your hands at that time and you are sitting in your living room at 4 a.m. on now it used to be a phone call, now a Zoom, with your team and the National Weather Service telling you, and snow could come in at 11 or 12, but we're not positive how much it could miss. You've got to make a decision. I always base it on student safety after learning some lessons. But it's one of those that if no snow comes, you could be the biggest moron. Why are you not having school?
Yeah.
And you kept kids home from school.
Because that affects parents,
Correct.
affects businesses.
If you go to
the whole
school
community.
and the snow comes down, then and I've had that happen, then you are stuck with egg on your face saying, you endangered students' lives. And so you are going to then get half of the people who are usually upset about a decision and half not. So I would just tell you this. Number one, I just don't think you can make sound decision making if you're spending a lot of time on social media. You have to make decisions based upon research, based upon data, based upon the things that the experts that are giving you advice. And then eventually make what's the best decision for kids and move forward on that. The second thing is you are really going to have to, in today's day and age, what I call a calloused ego. And so, and that took me some time to really, especially in a community like ours, where the superintendent is good, bad, right, wrong, is more well-known than other major cities. And is going to be seen and viewed and could be commented on if you're out in public, or your email inbox or things like that. You have to know that, you're going to take some blows and you're going to take some punches. So you better have a very big why you're doing this. Because right now in the superintendency in large districts, the shelf life's about 12 to 18 months right now for superintendents. And really? It is because of the difficulty of the job plus the very public nature of decision making. And so if you're making decisions or you're doing this job because you want to be liked, you want to be recognized, you want to be lifted up, it's not the right career to go into. You've got to be doing it for the right reason, which is I care for the kids, I care for the school.
Well, think about this. Folks that are in those positions as a leader, I've been in that position. We're human beings.
That's right.
We have families, right? So I can only imagine that, especially the public nature of what you're doing, that impacts your family too.
Yeah, without question.
And that's
without question.
And so you have to have that, and I can imagine that the importance of communicating with your family has got to be really
Well, setting
important
them
to
up to know what's about to happen, and no one knows until you're immersed in it. But I do get lots of, "Are you okay?" Like that kind of simple. And I'm great. What are you talking about? And so you have to prepare your family. They have to know. I recommend to my wife and my daughter not to be on social media either when it comes to JCPS and. Kids today really aren't on social media where they're talking about JCPS as much, but you just have to prepare your family for that.
Well, I will say that my dad's job was easier in Buffalo when it came to weather and whether they had to close, because all they had to do was have a guy go down and look at Lake Erie.
Yeah, and see if it's frozen.
And it's coming.
It's coming.
I mean, it's they know it's coming.
Yeah.
So here it's harder to predict.
Much harder.
Right? It's much harder to predict here. He had it easy. I'll have to tell him that next week when I see him. Let's keep on this line of leadership. And Marland, 2018.
We both started.
Yeah, about the same time, right?
Yeah. Been a few, 6, 12 months.
Yeah, and so that's 6 years now, going into 6 years. What are you most proud of? And also, kind of on the flip side, if there, in those first 6 years and kind of getting all this thing started up, if there had been something that you probably would have done that maybe differently, just from a learning perspective of the people that are listening.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely been a learning journey for me, but one I have truly enjoyed and have had great passion about. I've been blessed to have good leadership with my board, and you are a great part. Both of you have been an extreme part of that. But I came into this job with, as you said earlier, a great deal of healthcare experience. I did know how to build relationships, so I think that was a plus. But I really had not worked in education. My mother was a teacher. I had a lot of family members that were. My own experiences, and as a mother navigating the system for my daughter, I knew about it. But that was a huge learning curve for me. And I questioned myself a lot, I think, because of that. And I finally just had to say, you know what? You have been entrusted with this job for a reason, and you're going to have to learn, and you're going to pick up from other folks, but you have to move forward sort of with your vision as it relates to this and build a team, which was, I think, the most critical thing I've done, and maybe the thing I'm most proud of is that I have been able to build a very strong team that does know more about things that I don't.
You've got a great team.
Which I think is a key part of leadership, to know what you need. And not have any shame around that. And I have been able to do that. I have some very dedicated people that come to work every day and care about young people. And I think that's the thing, too, as you all were talking about. I always remind them there's always this noise that's running around with someone that thinks we didn't do something the right way, or a parent or a kid who isn't eligible for some reason, and we're not able to help them. But if we keep the focus and kind of quiet the noise as much as we can and really keep the focus on the young people that we're serving. We are here to serve the needs of young people. And when you keep that focused, I think everything sort of falls in place.
Yeah, and people need to realize that at Evolve502, you're providing the scholarships, but you're providing you're a provider as well. That's a whole different game, right? When you're actually on the ground level dealing with the human aspect of what it is that you're doing, especially, and we see that as well with what we do with our Learning Hub.
Definitely.
That's not high schoolers. These are kids that are, they're up through 6th grade and dealing with their parents as well. So you're in the provision of education as well. So.
And I think that work looks, and that was a thing too, I think, when we were struggling with when we first started, it's like, what does this comprehensive services mean? How are we, even Dr. Pollio said, I wasn't sure how that was going to work. I got the scholarship, most people do, but I didn't understand this other piece. And it was always to be this sort of convening table with folks that, we have the benefit of having folks from the city, from the school district, from the community, like your organization, St. Vincent de Paul, funders, others. But it's really the benefit of, let's all collectively look at what the data is telling us related to the barriers for our young people from cradle to career, and how do we come together to address that. And it was never for us to be in all of that work, but really identifying who's good at all these different pieces along the spectrum, and how do we ensure that we are all aware of it, that we are working together, that we're sharing resources when we can, and that nature. So we knew that piece. We didn't plan to necessarily get into the service business on that end,
Right.
if you will. But I think, again, we always said if we see a need, we'll jump into it and try to work with that. And when COVID hit and the schools closed, and Dr. Pollio and I talked, and it's like, okay, we are here to try to help and support you. What do we need to do? And so we created a rapid response team. We had people from all around the community that met every week for over a year to think about, what do we need to do now? How do we help support our families?
Yep.
And so we lifted up, how do we do things in community where people are, so that we eliminate transportation, we eliminate the issue around access, to be able to help support during this time of non-traditional instruction in the beginning.
Yep.
And so that's how this learning hub model sort of lifted up, because we were seeing nationally families that were well-to-do were creating their own little hubs.
Mm-hmm.
They were bringing the neighbors over, they were hiring teachers to come into their homes, and we said, well, how do we do that for our families that need it the most in community?
We were able to keep the kids at grade level during COVID.
Yes. And we
So, I
have,
mean-
I think the district, there was a study, a story that
Yep.
said we have recovered
Yeah.
better than most
Yeah.
out of COVID.
Yeah.
So again, it was about, what do families need? They need help with education, they need tools, and JCPS was right there providing teachers, providing money for meals, all of these things. But we asked the community, what do you need to help? St. Vincent de Paul, what do you need to now you're probably serving kids all day instead of just after school. What do you need to do that work? And so the city came in with some resources, with PPE supplies and things like that. So we were able to serve about 2,500 kids in that mode during COVID. And so we said, well, how do we continue that work? And we just kept leaning into that. And so now we're also doing, in addition to the summer engagement with the Backpack League that we help support.
We did that as well.
And you do that as well, which is huge, giving kids positive enrichment activities and things to do during the summer, and to hopefully help eliminate learning loss during that time frame. And then, as you know, we're also doing the after school reading, because again, we knew how critical literacy is, and we're seeing great work being done there with our young people there. So we're excited.
Amazing.
So yeah,
Amazing.
Very, very proud
You should
of all
be.
of that work, and we've got much more to do. I mean, we haven't fixed it. We still have our challenges ahead of us, but I think we're very well positioned to kind of continue to lean in and to learn. We're a learning organization ourselves, and we keep learning and tweaking and doing whatever else we feel like we need.
Well, as
to
Marty said, I mean, the effectiveness of the system is critical to success of just America, the U.S., the country, and you're part of that, and it's so important. I'm sure there's never not going to be demand for what you do. I actually tell people I wish we could go out of business because there isn't anyone that's unhoused, right?
Exactly.
But as we all know, that's probably not going to happen, and we're all needed, and there's never there's hope.
Yes.
We always have to kind of come from that perspective, that from a place of abundance.
Yes.
Even though there may not always be abundance, we can always figure stuff out, like you figured out during COVID, and then it led to something else. I think. But, Marty, you're beyond the shelf life. What'd you say, 12 to 18 months?
12 to 18 months.
So
I'm on year 8 right now.
Yeah. So you're into it for a lot longer than that, and I hope you're going to be into it for a lot longer than that going forward. And no matter
Thank you.
what. I mean, just amazing things that you've learned and how you've grown over the last so many years. Talk about some proud moments, some things that you really are proud of, and maybe you would have kind of done that differently.
Yeah.
Thing.
Well, I've reflected a lot on that over 8 years. The hardest part of this job is making decisions where there doesn't seem to be one great answer. Decision making's easy when it's like, okay, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. But when you're stuck in between that, and I will say this, and no disrespect to our leaders in our military, because when I say wartime leadership, this is different than wartime leadership. But when we use the term to say, we're leading during challenging and difficult times, I don't think there's ever been a more difficult time for school district leadership, and probably leadership throughout the nation, than what we've had over the past 5 or 6 years. So when I walked into the job, in 2017 we were facing state takeover. And so very unsure of what the future would be. Didn't know if I was going to get the job, but facing state takeover. Then we had a crisis around teacher sick outs. We had a global pandemic, which is no other superintendent has faced since 1920. Then going past that, severe staffing shortages nationwide that has caused us to have, issues. We still have our issues with Frankfurt and, dealing with a legislative task force. So it has been nonstop for the 8 years that I have been doing this job. However, it would be very easy for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to try to keep the boat afloat and not make any changes. And I just knew I couldn't do that. I've been in this district for 30 years. And so the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that we've continued during these challenging times to make major changes, from our student assignment plan to building new schools, which hasn't happened in decades here. I just went to a brand new opening of the brand new football stadium at Pleasure Ridge Park High School.
Oh, that's exciting. Last
Friday. And it's just, it's things like that, from the creation of Evolve502 and our summer learning, our backpack learning, collaboration with that. I could go on and on about these major changes that we have put into place, but it's happened during difficult times. And so that's been the thing I've been most proud of. There is no doubt. I look back on several things and think, would I do it differently? COVID comes to mind. I'm a superintendent of schools, not an epidemiologist, and I'm trying to make decisions and recommendations to our board based on something that no one has ever been taught. What is do we keep kids in school because we got to have learning going, or do we risk people's lives? And that was the context with which we were working. I think the biggest thing I would go back and change is my communication with the community around our staffing shortages, and especially going into the 23-24 school year where we had a disastrous first day of school. I made the mistake of saying these changes that we are having about 6 months before that are going to fix our bus situation. And I did not have the data nor the evidence to know that or say that, and what happened was we lost 100 more bus drivers between the time I said that and the first day of school, and then clearly had a disastrous first day of school. And I would have been much more candid with the entire community about, okay, we've gone from 1,000 bus drivers to 500 bus drivers and providing the same services. That is going to spell challenges, and that's going to and just being more honest with that and not thinking that, okay, I'm Superman and can fix this problem on my own. And so, making sure that you tell that appropriate story about the challenges we're facing and being very candid and open and honest about it, I think is something that I definitely would have changed.
Well, that's a sign of a great leader, to recognize that and learn from it, right? Mm-hmm. Because those are all very hard. It's easy to look back.
Yep.
In hindsight, right?
And communication, I would say, right? I would add that is so key. I think even with very involved board members or people in community that care about the work, they're not in it every day.
Right.
We are.
Right.
And we forget that sometimes, I think. And that's so right. It is, how you communicate, how frequently you communicate, how you share, here's the why we're doing what we're doing, then this is what we're dealing with, and then ask for input. I'm learning how to do that better myself.
It's interesting, too, as a leader. There's a lot that I've learned over the last 3 years about our community and all that. And, just the level of need, I just never saw it. You guys see it in the business that you're in. I never saw it. It was easy to go and I was working at a large consulting firm, $50 billion in revenues, 300,000 people kind of thing. And and it was almost, it was a challenging career, but it was very different, not nearly as hard as what I've had to do over the last 3 years. And it's a great learning. And recently retired, but I'm staying on in a volunteer role. And even still have a title, the Chief Community Relations Officer. Yeah. But I feel an obligation. I feel an obligation as a leader to tell my colleagues that I work with for almost 40 years what's going on.
Yeah.
Because it really is, and this isn't a criticism, because I'd be criticizing myself, right? Mm-hmm. It's really easy not to see. We did a recent podcast with the author, Greg Adler, who wrote When We Walk By, which is essentially a whole thing about when you see somebody, you kind of walk to the other side of the road, or you don't you don't help. You
Don't
just
engage.
say, I'm not even going to engage with you, kind of thing. And it's easy to do that, right? And lots of us have done that, and I get that. But I've learned though that the need is much greater, and that it really will take the community to come together, not to solve a problem. And I'm not saying that those that are unhoused or unhoused neighbors are problems. They're people to be loved, and they all have a story. So one thing that I am finding that's extremely important is storytelling.
Very
You got all kinds of stories. You can tell all kinds of stories. We can tell all kinds of stories. We got to do that because sometimes when you want to get to the other side and see changes, empathy has to be built in some cases, right? And fixed positions and perceptions broken down. And it's hard because there's lots of myths out there about all of our organizations that we run.
And
We got to tell more stories.
If I could say that, I couldn't agree with you more. The empathy or lack thereof, especially around children. And, I hear all the time, as you said earlier, children these days, or, that's a bad kid. And if you look and see, if everyone could see what some of our kids go through on a daily, I tell the story all the time. When I was a high school principal at Doss High School, very high poverty, kids would walk in the door, and I could tell something had happened at home, in the community. They didn't have breakfast. They didn't have a bed to sleep in. They might have slept on the floor somewhere. And they're walking in, and I'm expecting them to go into class and go into science or social or math class and learn. And I just think if I had gone through some of the things that I have seen kids go through, I know I wouldn't be successful either. And so we have to have more empathy for all, but especially our children today, and do everything we can to make children successful.
I couldn't agree more.
And I think that connects even to the parents. And then there was another question about, it's the same. We're very judgmental.
Yep.
We say, well, that's bad parenting. They're not taking care of their kids, and not realizing, but what are they dealing with trying to be? And I do believe every parent cares and loves their children, and they want them to be successful. Many don't know how to advocate for them. They don't know. Some are young parents that don't know how to parent.
Yep.
And that's reality, but it doesn't mean they don't care, and it doesn't mean that they don't deserve some support and help to be able to help navigate. So I'd say,
well, I am so appreciative of you all, and we could talk all day long, right? Because there's so much to talk about, and I'd love to come back together again in the future because there's so much to cover. One thing, though, Marland, where can listeners go if they want to support Evolve502?
go to our website, Evolve502.org, and we have a donor page there and information about our scholarship as well. So young people are looking to apply. Application just opened, so we're excited and getting out into schools right now. But yes, you can visit our website.
Well, I encourage everybody to go out there and donate to Evolve502 because it's changing young people's lives. There's no doubt. I mean, you can see the statistics, and I know that it's going to continue to do so. So,
thank you.
Dr.
So
Pollio,
Vincent de Paul.
we're trying, right? We're doing that.
Doing God's work, as I told you.
We're all,
last time.
and that's why I wanted to have us come together because it's such a connection in terms of what we all do, and that's what it takes. It takes. There isn't one solution, or there isn't one answer. It takes the community to come together, try to build that empathy, understanding, because then when you have that, it's like the story of the Good Samaritan, right? You're not going to walk by. You're going to stop and you're going to help that person. So, with that, thank you all so much. Dr. Pollio, Marland.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you guys are great.
Enjoyed it.
Appreciate it so much.